Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. All right, I am here today with a look at the new game from the Sadler Brothers, and that is part of their modular deck system games, and that is Altar Quest, the new dungeon crawl for the modular deck system. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the MDS system, it is a kind of game that the Sadler brothers have been working on where everything is basically controlled by a certain number of decks of cards, and you can mix and match those to create different kinds of scenarios and different kinds of threats and different things that you have to deal with. I think the first game that was out in this system was Street Masters, and I thought that I was going to absolutely love Street Masters because, well, first of all, the art is similar to the old Oriental Heroes and Jade Man comics. Now, I know those names are a little jingoistic, but that's that's the companies, that's what they were called. These martial arts comics from China that I used to read. And the art reminds me of that. It's a board game that simulates beat 'em up video games and martial arts films. However, I do not like Street Masters at all. For a game that is supposed to simulate fast-paced combat, the game itself of Street Masters is so slow and laborious and just grinding. For me, it's a total disconnect between theme and mechanisms. It just, every time I played that game, it just lasted so long. It took forever just to kill one of the bosses because by the time you got to the boss, he had so many like defense tokens. It was just, I do not like Street Masters at all. But I'm very curious about the deck system, about the MDS. Now they have another one, I think that came out after Street Masters, Brook City something, kind of like a buddy cop 80s movie style. And that theme, while I think it sounds unique in board games, it just wasn't really something I wanted. And so I was really happy when they announced that they were going to be making a dungeon crawl in that system because, well, hey, I like dungeon crawls a little bit. What can I say? So this game, it's taken me a while. It's a rough go at the beginning, at least for me it was. And a lot of that has to do with this bad boy right here, and that is the rulebook. Now I think I spend more time than any other board game YouTuber talking about rulebooks, but it's something that is just it's so important to me, and I'm going to keep belaboring the point. I'm going to keep talking about it until either things change or people get so tired of hearing me talk about it that they unsubscribe from the channel. So we'll see what happens first. Or maybe people will listen. But it is so important to me that a rule book really is a player's gateway into the game. When I read a rule book, I want to be excited about playing the game that I'm about to play. The exact opposite thing happened to me with Altar Quest, and I am not being hyperbolic at all, I promise. By the time I was done reading this rulebook, I was so bored, and I did not want to play the game at all. I was like this close to just packing the game up. There's almost like no theming, no excitement, no hype at all in the rulebook. And once you get past these first few pages, there's like not a single picture of an example of anything. It's just like walls of text. There's one picture up there. There's no little story snippets or little things about the characters and just the way that it's written. I'm not exaggerating at all. Last weekend, I put in a new kitchen faucet in my kitchen sink. The manual, the instructions for that, for removing the old faucet and putting in the new faucet, were literally more exciting than this rule book. It had jokes. It showed a little cartoon of like the guy taking out the old sink and hitting his knuckles while he was loosening up the undermount connection, with little cuss words coming out of his mouth. It said, hey, take your time. This is going to be easy. It was written in this conversational tone. And by the time I got done reading that manual for putting in a sink, I was like, yeah, let's do it. All right. Contrary to that, here is how this book describes everything in let's just read this. Range, counting spaces, and line of sight. Range is the distance between two game elements as measured in spaces. Each card that has a range value requires the effect's target to be within the indicated range of the game element associated with that card, usually a figure or token. To be within range of a target, a game element must be in the target's room or in a connected door space, and within the required number of spaces equal to or less than the range value. To count range between two game elements, count the number of spaces along the shortest path, including diagonals, from one game element to the other. Some game effects, such as attack and inflict tests, require line of sight. To determine line of sight between two game elements, draw an imaginary line from any point within one element's space to any point within the other space. If the line crosses over a wall or a closed door, the elements do not have line of sight to each other. If the line does not cross over a wall or a closed door, the elements have line of sight to each other. A game element may only have line of sight to another element in the same room or a connected door space. Oh my God, are you serious? You know what? One picture of like the board with some minis set up and some diagrammed green lines and red lines could have said all of that. Or maybe it could have been rewritten in a conversational tone. It's almost as if the Sadler brothers took their internal design document, the rules that they wrote for themselves, and just pressed print. There's no personality. There's no excitement in this rule book anywhere. That's how every single rule reads, and it doesn't do a good job of really explaining how the game is played. It presents all the rules. Yes, all the rules are in here. There's no rules missing. It's not a bad rule book, but it does a terrible job of being the gateway into the game that you are about to play. No excitement. It doesn't tell you like how the different things work together and what you're actually going to be doing on a turn-by-turn basis while you're actually hopefully having fun playing the game. So by the time I got done reading that rule book, yeah, like I said, I was just I was pulling my hair out practically. Like, what this sounds? It sounds like somebody who was already bored with the game wrote the rule book. Luckily, there was a guy on BGG, and I'll put a link in the description, who basically completely rewrote the rule book in a conversational tone with all kinds of pictures and all kinds of description and all kinds of examples. And his thread basically saved the game for me, because I read that and I was like, yeah, all right, okay, I get it. I get all the rules. I get how all the mechanisms are working together. And most of all, most importantly, I was super stoked to play the game after I read his rewritten rulebook. And I set up the game, and I have now played it 4 times right in a row, and I really like it. I don't think I love it. It's a little brain burny for me. I think it's a pretty challenging game, at least for me. But it's also really unlike anything else in my collection, in the way that things work together and in the way that you really do have to kind of solve the game like a puzzle while still being somewhat thematic. I still feel like there's a few missing pieces in the theming. Like good example right here is when the enemy, when anything happens, there's no flavor text on the cards. It doesn't tell you what is going on. When when it's his turn and it activates, the enemy inflicts 6. If unable, engage, and each hero within range gains 1 threat token. Or if you have this symbol here, you inflict 5. So what are the enemies doing? What is going on when they inflict? And that's kind of all over the game. So it's really up to the players to bring the theme to the table and come up with the ideas of what is going on thematically. And that's okay. I mean, that works. And I just talked about Shadows of Malice, and that requires the players to bring the theme as well. But that game doesn't present itself like this. It doesn't present itself in being this like super thematic experience. It's a very minimalist experience, and so I expected that. This presents itself in a super exciting thematic way with all the pieces, all the minis, and all the art and all of that. But when it comes down to it, when you're actually playing the game, it's super mechanical. It's a mechanisms forward dungeon crawl. In that sense, though, it's really unlike anything I have in my collection. And so I'm hoping that I can learn to really love this game, because I think this game would be fun to play with a certain group that maybe doesn't like a more thematic game, because you really can think about this game and puzzle it out. So the way that this game works, the decks, you basically are going to have some characters, and each of your characters is going to have a deck of cards associated with it. And you are going to have a number of cards. You're going to have your main character card, and that's going to give you your stats, and those are going to be the tests that you're going to be taking. And when you take a test, you pretty much look at the stat there. I think that's strength. I'm not sure what all the stats mean. I just look at the color and the symbols, really. And then you're going to roll that many of the hero dice, and you're going to be looking for certain symbols. These are successes. These are critical successes. They count as a success and an exploding die, so you have exploding dice in this. And then you also have this symbol here, which is a focus symbol. When you roll this symbol, if your character has in their inventory some focus tokens, then you can spend one of those as a success. If you don't have any, after you've completed the test, any of these that you don't spend, you get focus tokens. So it's really cool. There's like this system of coming and going with ways to mitigate the dice rolls, and I like that a lot. And then your character is also going to have a little special power down at the bottom. And then most characters are going to come with a couple pieces of gear, and the gear is going to give you a couple powers. Now I really like this person's gear, this horseman, Van Geyser. His special equipment cards were 2 swords, one in a main hand and an offhand sword. And the way that those two things worked together was really cool. And this was the 2 cards that kind of showed me the kind of combinations that you can make with this game. You can come up with some very clever card playing combinations that make you feel smart while you're playing. And then the rest of the cards in the deck are going to be all the things that you're going to be using to do different actions. This character would actually have these bounties where he could attach these cards to enemies to allow him and other characters to do special attacks against them. There are feats that you can do at any time, and then there are action cards that you can do. And when it is your turn, you're going to have 3 actions that you can take. And those are to play action cards, to move, to draw a card, to rest, or to channel. And that's another thing, that another deck of cards that you're going to be dealing with are going to be your altar cards. So the altars, these are the altars from the altar quest, and each one of these altars is going to have a special kind of thing that it's going to add to the game. The heroes take damage every turn. They're like these fire altars. You know, you're going deep down and the dungeon is full of fire, and so you have to deal with that. These altars are going to be emanating magic throughout the game's world. throughout the dungeon, and that magic is going to be represented by these different rune symbols on these special dice here. And you roll these at the beginning of the game, and then throughout the game you can use them to spend to do certain other attacks. The enemies can spend them to do certain attacks. And every time you spend one, you roll one. So these kind of represent this ebb and flow of this energy throughout the dungeon that people are using and channeling and summoning and spending. And it's really cool, a really neat system. And then additionally, you also have these yellow band cards. And these are going to be cards that you can use to upgrade if you play the campaign mode. So unfortunately, like the campaign mode is kind of where the actual, like what a lot of us would consider the dungeon crawl rules are, where you can upgrade your character. There is a deck of equipment cards, and now these are not used in the normal game mode, the 0 to hero one-off mode. These equipment cards are only used in the campaign mode, which is kind of a bummer. And I'm trying to think of a house rule where I can use these in my just regular solo games, because the thing that got me excited about this game was that it really wasn't billed as a campaign game. It's really fun just to set up and play one-off games. So you have your character decks. You're going to pick a character when you play. Right now I am playing with this gentleman here, Cedrin Highmore, basically a cleric. And then you're going to pick a quest. And this is the Kickstarter, the base Kickstarter version with the stretch goals. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different quests, ranging from the easy one, which is like more like a search and rescue type thing, to some really challenging ones. And one of the ones that I really liked thematically was this Into Deep. And this quest, you kind of pick off in, you kind of start off while the heroes are already exploring, and they've gone deeper and deeper into this dungeon, and they are running out of supplies. They're being hounded by enemies, and they're kind of at their wits' end. I mean, they're like, they're facing extinction here, and you have to survive deeper, deeper, deeper down into this dungeon. Because it says, there's no time to rest. The journey this far has been arduous, and it isn't looking to get any easier. However, after coming this far, giving up is not an option. There has to be an end to these depths, and you're determined to find it, whatever the cost. Unfortunately, the cost is already high. You've been pushed to the point of exhaustion, and your supplies are nearly depleted. The only way to survive is by searching every dark corner of these perilous depths. So you have to survive this really dangerous dungeon, and each of the quests is going to have its own setup rules. It's going to have its own rules. And then you're going to have a different quest deck, and there's going to be different ways that you use these cards. This particular quest, the heroes actually get these cards and put them in their hand, and they're bad things that they have to play on themselves because it just represents this building tension. So you're going to pick a character, you're going to pick a quest, and then you get to pick a group of enemies to fight. So you've got things like outlaws, you've got these bray, they're kind of like beast men. These crowls, they're kind of like crow people. You have the lunarians, which are basically like werewolves. You've got the frocks, which are these frog people. The raglanders, which are these pig people. Right now I am facing off against the poxoids, which are basically skaven. And then each one of these threat decks is going to have their rules, and there's going to be these threat tokens, and each enemy type has the threat token represents something different. And then each one of these decks of enemy cards is going to have minions, it's going to have stronger enemies, and also some traps and events that you're going to have to deal with. So you pick a hero, you pick a quest, you pick a group of enemies you want to fight, you pick an altar, and then you pick a boss. And so you've got a number of bosses. You've got Morgan. This is kind of like the rat ogre. He's the boss of the poxoids. And you've got Vivian, Billy the Kindler, kind of like a fire beast man or something, and a number of different bosses there. So you're going to combine all of those together, And you also have this deck of feature cards. And these are going to be different things like these like mushrooms or an altar or different things that you're going to come in contact with. Bookshelves, fountains, cages, weapon racks. And each one of those is represented by a mini. So each time you go into a room, you're going to find a different feature. But you're going to combine all of those together to create a quest. And then you're going to go on your quest. And you're going to be roaming through this map. Now, even though I don't love the game so far, the one thing I do love is the map. I wish more dungeon crawls used a map like this. It's kind of like Hero Quest in that it's a static map, but the way the game plays is basically you can take your starting staircase and you can start anywhere you want, and then you can just explore. So rather than having to go into a box and dig out certain tiles or just set up random tiles, all the tiles are laid out for you, whatever, and then you can explore through these doors. And every time you go through a door, you're going to place a door there. And then you're going to populate a room with a feature, with an enemy, with traps and that kind of stuff. And you're basically just going to keep going through the rooms. And sometimes you do need to think about how you're exploring, because sometimes you need to get back to the stairwell. So maybe you want to create some kind of circular path, or maybe you want to do a long run to and a run back. It just depends on the kind of quest you are playing. So the way you explore kind of becomes a little mini game. And I really like that. So there is, let's see, is there any other? Oh yeah, there's a search deck. So your search deck, these are going to be little things that you can search for, usually just potions, simple little things, not really any gear. One thing that you will find in this search deck is a lurker, and lurkers represent different powerful enemies that are going to be roaming, kind of like the roaming monsters from Massive Darkness. And those are pretty fun to fight. But the game is challenging. I've played, I think, 4 games, and I've won 1 and lost 3. And this one is kind of like at the beginning, but I'm already losing. I have almost won another one. One I lost basically at the second room. And this one is, yeah, this one's not going too well. It's a little brain burning. And for me, like, I don't, I'm not dumb, but I don't like to think a lot when I play games. But this game does require more thought, but I'm having fun doing it. I'm having fun coming up with different combos. I'm having fun using the altar dice with these rune symbols to create combos. But it is, once you start to get behind, it's really hard to come back. But I'm going to keep playing it, and I think it's going to stay in my collection, if only because it's very different from a lot of the games I have, just in how everything works together and how it's not just a dice rolling adventure game. There are some elements that that you need to ponder over, and it can be fun. I would only really play this game with 2. I can imagine any more. I can imagine it being really long. But man, I just wish this game had a better, just a better onboarding process, because it took me a long time. It was pretty frustrating getting into, and thank God that Board Game Geek thread exists, because if it didn't, I don't know if I would have even given it a chance after reading that rule book. Again, all the rules are there. It's just not presented in a very friendly way. So, all right, guys, well, that's a look at Altar Quest. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.